My name is Pierre Roman. I work for Microsoft, and today we're going to talk about getting ready for AI-assisted PowerShell coding. It's really AI coding, period, because it's not limited to PowerShell. Like any language you're working with, whether it's Bash, whether it's Python, Ruby, whatever, you can apply the same information to all of those languages. But before we do that, thank you so much to our sponsors, Chocolatey, Centino, Patch My PC, and ScriptRunner. If you've not stopped by their booth and had a chat with these people, please do so before the end of the day. They'd really appreciate it. And like I said, I've been in the infrastructure and operations for, aging myself here, 34 years. So I've seen everything from punch card to reel-to-reel tapes to hard drives that were the size of a small closet, all the way to the cloud revolution going through the hypervisor revolution to the web revolution and so on. But I was looking at that slide and I'm thinking, okay, today I'm talking about AI. Is there anything I can do to spice this up a little? So I uploaded my bio and a picture on a Discord server that uses a bot to generate some AI, and I say, give me something a little bit more dramatic. And I thought, that is it, because I look badass on this. But that's the thing about AI, is it's there to help you, but it's not there to replace you. It will not replace you. It is a trend, yes. Will it die? Probably not. Will it eventually get embedded into everything we do without really looking at it? Like we were at a place where the market, not the marketing, but the management basically said, you have to AI all the things, which is now, if any of you have watched the Build keynote, I think there were, in that first session, I think there were 30-some mentions of Copilot something, or something Copilot. So it's AI all the things. But will AI pair coders make you a ninja? I don't even know if we're still using that term. We are? Okay. Wrong. It will not make you a ninja. It will not replace your knowledge. It will not replace the thought process that you need to have when you're coding solutions. And I posted a video on LinkedIn a little bit ago, and one comment came out. And when I looked at it, this one comment kind of stood up for me. Somebody, Denny, that I have never met in my life, it's in a group of about 40,000 the PowerShell Power User Group on LinkedIn, says that it helps him write code at least 25% faster. But I love the part that he says, but it won't replace his creativity. And that's right. AI will help you. It's great at boilerplate stuff. Like, I suck at regex. So Copilot for me is a godsend, because I could just say, do me a pattern, regex pattern to find blah. And it comes out and it gives me something. Well, when we're looking at the artificial intelligence, it's not a new thing. It started in 1956. In 97, we were all out on machine learning. So machine learning using large sets of data to learn and try to predict what the next thing is going to be. So it's basically educated guess. That became deep learning, but those two models are really good if you're in IT. My first job, or one of my first jobs in a data center, I was the new guy. You know what that means. You get the shit assignments. Every Monday morning, I had to go and log in to, or remote into, I think it was 134 servers / minis and some mainframe access, and review the logs to see if anything had happened over the weekend. What do you think happens after line 95? Your brain doesn't even register patterns. You're just looking at it, and unless there's a big red X on it, you're really not going to notice anything. So that's where those models become very, very useful, because they're built to recognize patterns and then apply that pattern to your set of data and say, I've got this pattern over here, I'm going to apply it to this set of data over here. And oops, I see a pattern developing. So I'm going to pop up an alert, I'm going to pop up a log entry that says you're about to run out of resources in this workload. This is what those two developments in AI really, really mean. And typically, and I'm not saying every time, typically, meeting and somebody's talking about AI, they're marketing. If they're talking about machine learning, deep learning, LLMs, or large language models, they're technical. So that's one way of discerning whether or not you're talking to a salesperson or talking to a technical person. Anyway, and now we have generative AI. Generative AI is optimized in multiple ways. So how many of you have tried or used ChatGPT or Bing Chat and say, give me a function for this? Okay, majority of you. Great. ChatGPT and Bing Chat, because it really uses the same background engine, is optimized for language. And I'm not talking about like PowerShell language or C Sharp or Python language. I'm talking about English language, French language, German language. It's spoken language. That's what it's optimized for. So when you're, and I tried so hard to replicate a problem that I've had so I could grab a screenshot, where in ChatGPT, I asked it to write me a PowerShell function to do a task that I needed. And it gave me this long text and it explained it all. And I'm like, great, this is fantastic, cut and paste. And then when I started actually reviewing, because don't ever run that code without looking at it, because it will help you, but it's often wrong or missing pieces. Anyway, so I had a long function in PowerShell, but right in the middle was about 10 lines of C# code. Because as far as it's concerned, it's not optimized for that. GitHub Copilot uses codex model, which is a different model. And he's not in the room that I can see, but there's one of you at this conference that has reverse engineered the API calls and built himself a little model that would piggyback on the codex engine. I'm not going to name him, protect the innocent. But some of you in the community have created some really cool modules. Now we're at the point where we've got community modules and we've got commercial modules that are doing very much similar things. The difference is, I'm thinking about PowerShell AI, that is by Doug Fink, that's an open source project. He uses the ChatGPT engine, optimized for language, not optimized for code. So if you've ever used, anybody here has tried it? There's a few at the back. You'll notice that when you give a command like Copilot and you ask something, it starts thinking. And sometimes it can take a long time because the optimization is not quite there yet. One thing, and Demetrius and I were talking with a few of you yesterday, the most important part of AI or LLM or pair coding or whatever you want to call it is context. If you open a blank file called, I don't know, test.ps1, the only context that you're giving Copilot or whatever AI tool you're using is that I should be looking at something PowerShell. It doesn't know exactly what you're doing. doesn't know exactly how you're doing it. So if you ask it a question, please, how do I do X, or write me a function that does this, it doesn't have any context as to, well, okay, if you, and one of the examples I've used is, give me a list of my VMs. And all of a sudden you get a command, you run it, and then you get a bunch of errors saying that it can't find the VMware DLLs. It's because you didn't give it context. Did you want the VMware VMs? Did you want the Hyper-V VMs? Did you want the Azure VMs? Did you want VMs in AWS? It doesn't have any of that context. So it tries to guess whatever the context is. It's Thursday morning. Let's have some fun a little bit. So context is extremely, extremely important. So that kind of leads to, you've probably seen those online now that are prompt engineers. What the hell does that mean? It just means that they've learned how to incorporate as much context as possible into the prompts that they give. Does it mean they know more than you? No, it's just they're capturing a trend. So for the next 30-some minutes, we're going to get away from slides, because Gal told me we want mostly demos. So let's go into it. So I am in my environment. And let's just open up a file. It's an empty file. Let's close this. And I am not only AI assisted, I am also hardware assisted, because I can't type to save my life. So as I mentioned, Copilot and those types of AI assistants are fantastic at boilerplate stuff. Give me a path. Yeah, oh God, I can't read this. All right. Maybe I should go back up here. Parse the path in the list. Well, now it gives me, but now I have context because it read the first line. It already knows what I'm looking at and stuff like that, so it has my context. So I write, okay, tab to enter it, or to accept the suggestion, and I run it, and I got a nice list. These are extremely simplistic example. I don't pretend to be an expert in PowerShell. Every single one of you is a better coder than I am. Because I don't deal with this every day. That's not part of my job. I'm looking at trends. I'm looking at how these can benefit you and how you can benefit and like grab value from those tools and how you can apply them to your environments. So we've got our environment, but it doesn't, like, even though this is a PowerShell file, because it's got that context of that PS1 file, and I've already got a couple commands in there, it's trying to figure out what's next. So it's using some of those algorithms to try to defer intent, because that's really where we are going, or the industry as a whole is going. We started out with, here's a crap load of data, figure out the patterns, apply it to other data, make a prediction. Now we're at, tell me what you want, and I'll try to figure out how to give it to you. Eventually, and we haven't really figured out when that's going to happen, is you're going to get to your machine and you're just going to say, and I will use Demetrius's example, I want to edit the picture of a flower. So the AI will automatically find an editor, a picture or a JPEG editor or some kind of graphic editor on your machine, spin it up, go look for a picture that it thinks it's a flower, load it up, and then give you the tools. We are going towards intent. Early stages, but this is where we are. So now Copilot is thinking, okay, you've been dealing with paths for the last 2 commands. Maybe you want to do something else with the path, but it doesn't know exactly what it is, so it starts guessing. It's trying to infer intent. So in this case, I'm not doing that, but I could do other things that are not necessarily PowerShell, but I can say, okay, what's the brand? And because I can never remember what those commands are. So, all right, so get me the instance of my info, and I run it, and it tells me, yep, it's a Lenovo, and got a model number and everything else. So now I've given it context, said get the brand name and the model of my device using PowerShell. I could have said using Python, and it would be a little confused because I'm in a PS1 file, I'm in context, and the context for Copilot is basically everything that's open at the time. So if you're running a script that is parsing a JSON, that is calling a function that's in a different file, make sure that all those files are open or all in tabs or at least in the same directory that you're working in. Because Copilot, first of all, has a fairly small amount of memory that it fills with your context. So it knows, okay, I've got a JSON open, so let me start looking at what the syntax and the how it's organized. And then I've got a PowerShell here that refers to it. So I'm assuming that at some point you're going to ask me to parse the JSON and give me something. It starts thinking about that, and it fills that little bit of memory. If it's in ChatGPT, and I don't have the exact statistics, but I believe it's something like 4K worth of context memory. With Copilot, with the enterprise, the paid version, I believe it goes up to 16K. That's why when sometimes it fills up and then it gets confused. And of course, if I go to another file and I say, I've got this little function here that I use at home because my ISP doesn't support dynamic DNS, but it changes my address at home every 2 days. So when I'm remote, when I'm traveling, I want to be able to access my home network. So I've got this little function that runs at home that checks my IP address when it changes and then uploads it. But in this case, I've got context. It's PowerShell, and there's a name, the name of the file, get pub IP, so public IP.ps1. So it starts thinking, what would he want? So I can go here and say, hey, set a register path to get my IP address, and boom, I've got it. Now if I run this, now, my IP address currently is 195.113.187.130, and if any of you try to break into my machine during the presentation, I'm going to be very upset. No, but this is our public IP address. It's not the local IP address. Make sense so far? It can get a little bit more involved. One of the things that we have is we're starting to see companion apps or companion extensions. And with Copilot, we have what it's called Copilot Lab. I'm not really supposed to talk about it too much because it's in preview, but it is publicly available. It's in the extension gallery. And basically all it is if I open it up here, it's got a few things. Let me open up this file first. I had a Copilot Lab. It's a collection of things that it can do for you. Number one, it could explain some code. You guys document all your codes, right? You've never inherited code from a coworker or somebody that left the company, and there's like a couple hundred lines of code, and you go, what the hell is this? Never? Well, if you had, so let's say, I'll take another file that's a bit more involved here. So I can say to Copilot Lab, I'm going to select all of this and say there's not a stitch of context in here. So explain the code. And of course, lots of scrolling because I'm got on. And then it gives me a result. Error, of course. That's more like it. It's taken. If it comes back really quickly, typically it's because it missed its window. All right. So it says that here's the explanation. First line is a comment. Okay, great. No, it's not. See, I told you earlier, it's not always right. First line is a comment. No, it's a path to a log file. But line 2 is the name of the file. You can call anything, blah, blah, blah. Start your script. And it'll start and try to explain every command or every block of code that you have. So if you've got somebody that just dumped some code on you, you can sit there and go through a couple hundred lines of code and try to figure out what it does. Or you can give the first crack at it using some of those AI codes. Another thing you can do is language translation. So if I inherit, I've got a whole bunch of Linux servers that I'm using. So I'm using some Python, I'm using some anything, because I haven't yet deployed PowerShell on those Linux. And yes, I'm looking at you, because we are looking at how we can automate that in some environment. That's a customer that I have. But now I have some code that's in another language, and I'm not familiar with it. So I can go into Copilot Lab and say, translate my code into, and let's go through the list. There's, I think I saw Fortran. Anybody else code in Fortran yet? Still? Oh, one. So I can go all the way to PowerShell. And I'm going to ask PowerShell. So it's going to look at that code. And of course, this is very, very rudimentary. But it's going to give me code that I can accept. It's going to give me code that I can look at. And the AI wants feedback. Is this correct? Unhelpful? Or this is great? We're kind of reinforcing what the patterns are and whether or not it's learned properly. So I'm going to say, yeah, this is great. And now I can cut and paste that code and use it in my PowerShell script. So again, and just another AI tool, is this session is not about getting real deep in AI, is how you get started with AI for your PowerShell scripting. One thing that it has, and let me open another one. Here, let's take the one that had no comments whatsoever. And in my brushes, I got one that says readable. Make this code readable. So, all right, so I'm going to click on that, and it's going to go, and there was a little spinning PowerShell Copilot logo, and then it says, yeah. But now if I look in my code, it's taking part of the explain, so it's analyzed the code. It's generated its own comment and inserted it into my file, making it more readable. There are some of those, I'm not going to go through all of them because we only have 20 minutes. But you can have types, you can fix bugs, you can debug, you can clean. So clean will basically remove all those codes, those comments. And I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but you can. Make robust, where it's going to analyze your code and then it's going to insert like error handling. It's going to clean your if or your for each loops, and it's going to clean out all the stuff that's sometimes we code and we end up with long functions, and when you really look at it a second or a third time, or somebody else comes up and looks at it and says, why are you doing it this way? Like, Christian's session yesterday that gave me a whole bunch of different ideas on how I can optimize some code to run a lot faster. So it'll help you do that. So it's not something that's going to turn you into a ninja, but it's going to help you. And then, of course, there's test generation, where it takes your code, figures out what you're trying to do, and then builds in tests into your code. Make sense? All right. Let me open the next one. However, there's two ways that Copilot or those types of tools provide you help. One is live coding. So it's watching you. It's not collecting anything. It is collecting, Copilot in specific, is collecting telemetry as to how you're using it, but not what data you have. Like the code that you have doesn't go back for the training model. It only trains on open source and publicly available code that's in GitHub and other public location. So you don't have to worry that if you're, would anybody here hard code credentials into a script? Say it now or forever hold your peace. Okay, good, because if you did, I would say get out. If you're hard, for some reason, if you put an API key or anything like that in your code, you don't have to worry that the code goes out. Plus, Copilot has a security blanket, if you will. Anything that is credentials, keys, or secrets of any kind will never get suggested to you. It gets stripped out completely. So even though if somebody else did it and the model learned how to do it from that code, it's not going to include that part into the suggestions. Good? All right. So live coding is number one. So if I go to my line 6 and I go to the end and I take a space, oops, and now you've got two. You've got autocomplete or IntelliSense, part of Visual Studio or the PowerShell extension that's trying to figure out what I'm doing, but at the same time, I got Copilot that's trying to do the same thing. So let's back up, let's go back in. And of course now, because I want it, it's not there. There we go. Set context, because it knows that I'm getting the subscription that I want to set that as my context. So it will, as I type, as I code, will start throwing things in. Sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's right but needs adjustment. So yeah, so that's what we call a live coding. So it's asking me, or it's helping me while I code. And now it's trying to figure out what my next step. It's trying to infer intent. So you're connecting to Azure, you're getting your subscription. So do you want to create a resource group? Well, not in this particular case, but it's trying. So in this particular case, I'm trying to list all the VMs and the tags in my subscriptions that are currently powered on and store that info into a variable. It says, okay, and it gives me my command. Anybody can tell me what's wrong with this command? Looks right, doesn't it? Except that that's what I meant earlier when I said it's not going to, because it still needs your thinking. This is the right command. But because the objects that I'm looking at, which are the power state, and I've asked for also its tags, those parameters or those properties are not exposed by the get azvm command. I have to go in and say dash status. And of course, the command is now gone. Let's try that again. Let's accept it, go back, dash status, and now it'll run. But now I've got a list of VMs. Now what do I do with it? Again, it's gotten context from my title. It says shut down in the title. So I was like, okay, I know what you want to do. You're grabbing something and you're going to shut them down. So you want to loop through each and shut down. Yeah. But I don't want it to give me just one suggestion. There might be other ways I want to do it. So if where are the tags are in the object. We'll see it in a second. They're saved in the VM variable, VMS variable. So go back, loop through and shut down, but I go Control-Enter instead of just Enter. So now I'm forcing GitHub Copilot to basically synthesize up to 10 specific solutions, because I want to be able to see it. So if I go, okay, suggestion 1, loop through those VMs, stop the VM, yeah, it's good. All right, this one's also good. This one here is in one command, and it's piped. No, it's not even piped anywhere. So this one won't do anything. There's another, so I know that suggestion 1 works, so I'm going to accept it. But you're wondering, you're right. I asked it for tags. What do I want to do with these? So I'm going to go here. Oops, wrong line. And go here and say, only the tags that have a life cycle set to non-persistent. Okay. Gives me some code. It's going to look at the tag, so vm.tag, lifecycle, non-persistent, if that's true, save it. So yeah, I'm going to accept this. And because I've got this inside, I don't need the rest of that code. Again, it still depends on you, because now we would have that command twice, because it doesn't know to go and remove the next command you've done. And it's right. So if I run it, that's going to take a while. It's going to go out, it runs, goes into, gets the extended properties, which is the power state and the tags, and then it starts looking at my machines. So not tagged as non-persistent, skipping, not tagged as non-persistent, skipping, and then I'm done. So could I have written this by myself without Copilot? Absolutely. Would it have taken me a little longer? Possibly. This is a very simplistic explanation, but you never know. Now, some of you have said to me, well, I can do this in ChatGPT. So I can go here and say, write a function that gets the external IP of my computer in ChatGPT. And you ask it to run, and it has a cap. It starts thinking, yeah, sure. Do you want it in Python? Oh, because remember, I didn't give it any context. ChatGPT doesn't have any context. It doesn't know that I'm in the PS1 file. It doesn't know that I want PowerShell code. So it gives me information that now it'll give me in JavaScript, because it doesn't know what I asked. I was not precise enough in my context. So let's stop generating. Let's recreate this. Write a PowerShell function. And I'll go out and do the same. Which is very similar to the function that I was working with earlier. I don't know whether or not it learned it from me or if it learned it from somebody else, but this is kind of typical code, so it's easy. If I go to Bing AI and do the same thing, I'm not going to do it because we got 9 minutes left, But it's using the same engine, so it's going to give me similar results. And that's all good for coding. That's all good for when you're writing long scripts. How many of you spend a significant portion of your day in the shell? Because somebody called and said machine X is misbehaving, and so you're going in and you're asking, okay, list window machine, what's the state of that machine? And you're not actually writing long script, you're just sending command and getting information, right? Something we do every day, or pretty much every day. That's where CLI, Copilot CLI comes in, but it's not just Copilot CLI. Doug Fink with PowerShell AI does the exact same thing or something very similar. So it's very good to say for Copilot, of course that worked. Let's refresh it. Okay. So the question mark is an alias to the Copilot CLI exe, and I'm passing it that string that says, but give it the PowerShell command to list all the PS1 files currently in this folder, and it gives it to me, and then I can run it. Cool. Run this command, are you sure? Yes, and it gives me the list. That's fine. I can ask it, Copilot, count even numbers from 1 to 10. Excuse me. This one is Doug's PowerShell AI. It's a very similar model. It's to help you while you're in the shell. And I'm going to say, yep, you run this, or tell me what it is. And of course, don't have that key. I thought I had it saved. Anyway, it would give me, if I had put in my OpenAI key, because that's one thing, that's a difference. If you got PowerShell, if you got CLI with Copilot, your account is authorized and it takes care of it. With Doug's model, you have to go into ChatGPT, create an account, set a spending limit. Remember to set a spending limit, because you could have a very nasty surprise at the end of the month on your credit card bill. And then it gives you a key, you generate an API key, you save that as a variable, and it goes. But what I wanted to show is count every number from 1 to 10. What do you think the answer would be? Even numbers. So we're looking at 2, 4, 6, 8. Well, the answer would be 4. And you go, how the hell did you come up with that? I asked it to count how many even number there were. I didn't ask you to list them. And that comes back to context. You have to be very precise in what you want it to do and how you want to do it. Anyway, so we've got help for live coding. We've got prompt-based or suggestion-based coding. We've got tools to look at a bunch of code and explain it to you and insert comments and pre-fill like functions and required parameter and all of that stuff in the tools. And it's all driven by the AI model, the Codex AI model that optimized for code. But when we look at that, one of the questions that I often get is ownership. Who owns this thing? And I've been advised by our legal department, and I love my job, so I'm not going to go too much further than that, to say Copilot or any of our AI products is like Word. It's a tool. If you write a document in Word or write a PowerPoint file, a PowerPoint presentation in PowerPoint, who owns the result of that tool? You do. We do not. We have no ownership, and unless you put it into a public repo, We're not going to learn. We're not going to make it part of the learning data. GitHub Copilot has some filters that can be enabled or disabled, because if your company, if you're a bank, if you're national defense, Secret Service, if you're James Bond, and you want to make sure that everything is set, you can filter any public code. And I realized that my company this week has applied a policy, and it's hard to see here. Of course, I don't have it installed. That's great. It blocked it. Now it's blocking public suggestions of public code for my environment. And because it's driven by policy, I can't change that. So there are filters and configuration that you and your company can do to limit what can be done with that code. And of course, availability is now for GitHub Copilot, Copilot X, which will be coming later. And I forgot one demo, and I've got 3 minutes, so I can do it, is chat. So what we did in ChatGPT, where we said, okay, give me that, and it went out and got me info, that same functionality is now included also in or will be included, sorry. It's in private beta right now, or private preview. Preview is the new beta, like orange is the new black. Where you can actually go and with natural language ask it or tell it what your intent, what you want, what you need, and it'll go out and do it using the Codex engine or LLM, not the ChatGPT LLM. So it's optimized for code, but it has the same look and feel as asking ChatGPT, Bing Chat, and other LLM of that type to provide you with the help that you need. Pretty cool? So, Copilot Chat, Copilot CLI will both be available in Copilot X when it releases. Anyway. Questions? Clear as mud? Too early? Well, then I'm going to... Oh, I didn't see you with the light. Is there a release date for Copilot X? No. Well, there might be one, but we're not privy to that information. Unless Stephen has gotten any other info. No. They don't tell us much. Any other questions? But you can sign up for the waiting list or the preview. They do it in batches, so it might take a bit. So you can go to the website and sign up for the chat beta and the CLI beta, and they batch approve, so they kind of trickling it out. Okay. Anything else? Yes. Let me see if I understand the question. Is there plans to have rules so that AI would apply the same suggestion every time? Okay, so yeah, so that was like, is there rules to limit, let's say I want only suggestion for Python, I want only suggestions for PowerShell, and so on. Is that correct? I do not believe there is functionality or plans to say, I only want this. The plans that I know of is public or only learn from the repos that our enterprise owns. So it only learns from your own code. Or it only suggests stuff from your own code. Right? Demetrius? Yep. Yeah, so if you have questions or comments or suggestions, pierre.roman@microsoft.com, and I'll connect you with the appropriate people. And that works for all of you. Don't just spam me tomorrow morning, but... All right, with that being said, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day.